the channel is the Striving Project, and we kind of represent Saints in the South.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And that's why I think if we keep the Saints in the South. That's
Right.
who we are. That's where we are.
We are the Saints in the South on the Striving Project
on
channel.
the side. Yeah, exactly. So this one's a little easier to see. This is the kneeling, basically cat is taken after the Captain Moroni. But what this represents to me, you have Moroni, and I even say put yourself there. So if you're talking about Joe, Sue, Kenny, whoever we're talking about, put yourself there. And the kneeling represents humility. Okay.
Right.
And then you have the bowing head representing reverence to God. And then you have the title of liberty, okay, there, and representing your standards, your beliefs, what you're willing to stand for, what you're willing to fight for. And then the sword represents not only the willing to fight, but the willingness to defend your standards and your beliefs. And so that's why I love the kneeling Captain Moroni, because we can all picture ourselves in that situation or in our own situation. And we all have opportunities to show humility, reverence God, stand for our beliefs, our standards, and then take action and in forward and in defense at different times in our life. So the Striving Project, brother, here we go.
On the sword of the statue of Giovanni della Bande Nere on the facade of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, Italy. And on the sword, on the blade, I'll send you this picture and stuff. On the blade is this Latin, "Don't pull me without reason. Do not lead me without bravery." That's inscribed on his sword. And I was like, man, that's legit.
Of atheists like to make the argument that we don't need religion to have morality.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't understand that they think this morality is just some kind of innate thing that everybody has. And it's just, and they don't even understand that what they experience as just accepted, like foundational truth,
right,
comes from the Judeo-Christian belief system. The entire Western civilization was founded on. And that's why we value why we value honesty, we value kindness, we value compassion for people, who are less fortunate. Those aren't universal things.
We are Saints in the South, your source for gospel growth and good times. All right, here we go. Welcome everybody to another episode of Saints in the South. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you.
I feel older already.
That's right. Yep. This is episode 252. Kenny, he was the lone survivor through the holidays. He managed to survive the holidays and managed to get on and do a recording for us last week. So we appreciate you stepping up and then doing that one for us, Kenny.
Yeah, it was a little different. So I don't know if it's a little bit more serious than usual, less fun and more
right. a little bit of or less of the good times.
Yeah,
more gospel growth. I really like how you did that. I like how you started out with Elder Kieran. Yeah. And I really like the outro there on using President Nelson's talk there. And I did want to touch base since we were covering that last week real quick. They were deciding whether to build another monument or to use the opportunity to share a proclamation, right? Of words, a monument of words,
exactly.
so to speak, monument of words. And sitting there in the Sunday school class last Sunday with Emory teaching and everything, and it came to my mind. I didn't ever have the chance to share it, but you can only do so much with a monument, and there's only so many people that will see that in person. You may see videos of it, you may see pictures of it, but most people will not be able to experience that in person. Whereas the proclamation on the restoration, everybody that can get their hands on it can have a hard copy in their hands, in their home. And it's something that we can all, I think, experience on a greater level, on a greater spiritual level, that proclamation. So I really am glad that they chose to go that route.
There's debate over whether these official proclamations are canon. I believe they are, because those official proclamations are signed and endorsed by all 3 members of the First Presidency and all 12 of the apostles. Yeah. And so basically, this is all of them in agreement, presenting this as this is what we believe. This is doctrine. This isn't just one of our opinions. And yeah, to me, it's the same as Scripture. The official proclamations are essentially the same as, reading a chapter from the Bible or anything else. It's revelation.
Absolutely. That's good. Well, Kenny, I believe you are leading our discussion on Come Follow Me this week.
Right. Yes. So I wanted to start out just by saying it's funny to me, and I don't know if anybody else experiences this, how reading scriptures at different times, I know we've talked on here about how, we sometimes will pick things out that we didn't notice before, or, see things in a slightly different way. But I kind of feel like reading certain passages of scripture at a different time in your life, it hits completely different, so to speak. Because the section from Joseph Smith history has never hit me as hard as it did this week reading it. Man, it got me fired up. Like I've never felt fired up like that from reading this. But so we'll just go ahead and get into it. And so this week is Joseph Smith history, chapter 1, verses 1 through 26. It's titled, I Saw a Pillar of Light. And I do want to read the intro from Come Follow Me. It says, "You might say Doctrine and Covenants is a book of answers to prayers. Many of the sacred revelations in this book came in response to questions. The question that began it all, the one that sparked the latter-day outpouring of revelation, was asked by a 14-year-old boy. A, quote, war of tumult of opinions had left Joseph Smith confused about religion and his relationship with God. Perhaps you can relate to that. We find many conflicting ideas and persuasive voices in our day," which is very true. "When we want to sort through these messages and find truth, we can do what Joseph did. We can ask questions, study the scriptures, ponder, and ultimately ask God. In response to Joseph's prayer, a pillar of light descended from heaven. God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared and answered his questions. Joseph's testimony of that miraculous experience boldly declares that anyone who lacks wisdom might ask of God and obtain. We can all receive, if not a heavenly vision, at least a clearer vision, illuminated by heavenly light." And this is something that I've talked about when I've shared my own story of coming back to the church. I do remember I was at a point in my life where I had attended various local evangelical churches. I was really studying the different beliefs of the different denominations, not only the different Christian denominations, but, religion in general and different religious belief systems. And I've always been really fascinated with religion. But in the back of my mind, I had I knew about Joseph Smith, and, and I felt like, okay, if I'm going to inquire with a sincere heart, then I'm going to receive an answer. And it's the only time in my life that I fasted and prayed for 3 days about this decision before I finally basically gave up, really, because I wanted a answer. I knew I probably wouldn't get, a divine visitation, but I wanted something concrete. I wanted some kind of a sign, and I was frustrated that I didn't get it. But at the end of the 3 days of fasting and prayer, I just had this nagging feeling in the back of my mind to go back to, the Latter-day Saint church. That's where you need to go. Just go there next Sunday, And so I did. I gathered the kids, gathered my boys up, and it's like, okay, this Sunday we're going to another church. They'd never been there before. They've been to a few other churches, that we'd have been attending. And it turns out that was the answer to my prayer. It wasn't any kind of a pillar of light or any kind of blinding sign or anything like that. It was that still small voice. It was, what I interpreted as just kind of a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. But I went that Sunday. I sent the kids off to primary, and I was scared to death because, I've shared this before. I'd been attending at that time, was attending basically Pentecostal church that was very animated. They had a separate adult church on one end of the building, and way down at the other end of the building was the children's church. And the children's church was like lights and loud music and like all kinds of exciting stuff, and I was like, man, I remember Mormon church, man. It's boring. My kids are gonna hate it. They've gotten used to all the fun and the lights and the music and everything, and they're gonna hate it. I just know they are. So I met up with them after sacrament 2 hours later and asked them, so what'd y'all think? And they were like, yeah. So it was, Kenny, my oldest, Joey, my youngest, and Brandon, who was, my honorary child that basically went wherever we went. And all three of them were like, yeah, it was pretty cool. And you could have knocked me over with a feather. And I was like, so you want to come back here next Sunday? And they were all three like, yeah. I was blown away. I was like, wow, that's not what I expected. And since then, that's been, good gosh, I don't even know how many years ago now. 15, 16 years ago, something like that now. And and since that time, I think I can count on one hand the number of Sundays that I've missed church. Cool. It's just, it's amazing that we have that God has given us the privilege of asking him if something is true and receiving answers to that prayer. And we have to be receptive to whatever answer we receive, in whatever way we receive it, in whatever time frame we receive it, because that's where we tend to get frustrated when we try to lock God into our own little time frames and our own expectations of how things should be, because he very seldom works that way. He knows us better than we know ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like about your experience is that you acted. So you didn't necessarily receive something that you were looking for and hoping for. You knew you weren't going to receive some kind of angelic visitation, but you were looking for something, a really strong, overwhelming feeling at the time. And
yeah, I wanted a clear answer.
Yeah,
something undeniable.
Clear answer. But what you received was a thought to go back to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that's how it came. And so, and then you acted. And then you acted upon that answer, because you had a sincere heart, a sincere desire to know where to go, to know where to take your boys. And going back to Joseph's experience, the reason I believe that he had that experience is because he had a sincere desire to know which church to join. We also know in some of the additional accounts there that are given, I think there's 4 or 5 different accounts there, that he had also sought out for a remission of his sins. He had mentioned that in one of his accounts. And that's that when you're showing up begging, asking for forgiveness. Tell me what to do. I'm willing to do it. I mean, you're laying it all on the line. You're down on your knees, head bowed. Tell me. And both of you acted. Great job.
You got to put in the work.
If I can ask, what started you on your journey? You were going to all these different churches. You were actively looking. What made you want to look? Why not just have a 2-day weekend every week?
Okay, so I'm not going to go into the whole story. Maybe I'll record the whole story and release it for Patreon or something if anybody's interested. But long story short, a lot of stuff was happening in my life, and I ended up spending a night and a day in jail. And I was very, very much in a state of mental anguish and emotional unrest. And I just felt like the only way I've thought of to describe it is like, imagine if your body is hollow, like if your skin is just hollow and your whole body is full of like angry bees or like wasps or something, you know, like that's what I felt. I felt like my whole body was just full of buzzing angry bees or something. And it was just, I was so just unsettled and so it's hard to describe it. But when I was in that jail cell, I felt like I had hit rock bottom because, man, I'd been raised good. You know, my mom did the best she could and tried to, you know, teach me right. And I was a good kid, you know, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? You know, I'm literally in a jail cell right now. What happened? And so I prayed that night for the first time in many years. And that night I received the most tangible answer to a prayer that I've ever received in my life to this day. And the answer to that prayer, all it told me was that God exists, that God is real, that when you pray, there is somebody listening. And I had the most tangible physical sensation that it's crazy to think about now, that let me know without any doubt that God exists and he heard my prayer. That's awesome. And that's what kind of started me on my path. And, you know, I had, you know, attended different churches and, you know, that's where I was kind of, you know, doing, you know, kind of had turned my life around at that point. You know, I basically, you know, I got saved, as they say in the South, you know, and I was going to different churches, and there was a period of time, a couple years where, you know, there was a little tiny church. I loved it, man. Like the small churches have such a sweet spirit sometimes, man. Like there was this little tiny church out in the middle of nowhere in Pierce County. And they found out that I was a musician. And so I was like playing bass with their little praise and worship band and stuff. And it was great. It was fine, you know, and, you know, I went to some other churches, and I had ended up going to this one that I was talking about with, you know, all the lights and everything. And they were showing Willy Wonka in the children's theater and children's church rather. And so they had the whole place decked out, like the scene in the movie where they're in the chocolate factory and everything's edible, you know, like, and it was insane. And the children's pastor at the time is still a good friend of mine, great guy. He was coming to church. He had a full purple, like satin suit, the full Willy Wonka with the top hat and the cane and everything. And that's how he came to church every Sunday. And they were showing clips from the movie and applying the spiritual lessons from it. You know, like the many are called, but few are chosen. You know, they sent out all the tickets and only a few people actually were chosen. And then the ones that went through the chocolate factory, you know, they one by one, they didn't persevere. You know what I mean? They kind of fell to the wayside by their choices. They made bad choices.
To the end. Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't endure to the end. And so, you know, Charlie was the only one who endured to the end. And so he inherited the kingdom of
reward,
God. And, so, and it was crazy because I'd never thought of that movie in that way before. And I was like, dude, that's wild. I've never thought of Willy Wonka in that way before, but it was a cool object lesson.
I was going to say, Kenny, I think your example is instructive. It reminds me very much of Lehi's dream. I think many times we overlook the beginning of Lehi's dream. We remember the iron rod, we remember the great and spacious building and the naysayers and stuff. We remember the tree and the fruit and stuff. But I think many people forget the beginning, when Lehi sat for an undetermined amount of time in complete darkness until he realized how lost and how desperate his situation was. And he cried out in agony for help. And it reminds me of you in your jail cell. And that started him on his journey, started you on your journey. And I think, like Jackson was kind of indicating, it kind of started Joseph Smith on his journey. A question, something missing that ate away at him that he couldn't find the answer to. And he knew, kind of an out of place feeling. He knew there was, something else, and he had to find it. And I think that's really what modern revelation is really tied into. And I think that's a key thing from Lehi, and even seeing his children and how some went to the rod and others didn't. Is I think the ones who didn't, Lame and Lemuel, they had many opportunities. They saw angels and things like that. So seeing angels and having these, bright moments and thundering voices and all that, the things you were kind of looking for, that's not always the answer. It didn't work for them. I think the answer is the question. You got to have that question first. You got to have that desire. You got to have that nagging bees and wasps flying around inside of you, feeling that I'm not where I need to be. I need to find something. What is the something? And then that question leads you to the answer, and that leads you on that path to the rod and to the the tree with the fruit. And then you like Willy Wonka, you got to avoid all the traps and stuff out there. That's right. To get to the inheritance. But that's really cool though, man. I'm glad you shared that.
Thank you. Yeah, man. That's why I like you, Joe. that is really cool though. Comparing it to Lehi's dream.
Yeah. You've experienced his dream. So if you get a chance, go back and read it. Think about it. See it from the beginning.
Yeah. And Joseph, this is really short. It's literally 26 verses, but I highly recommend going through and reading this. So he had this experience. Obviously, he was very, very much very, very, very preoccupied with his spiritual well-being. And this is there's not very many people that are like this at that age. Like Elon Musk is somebody that comes to mind that I've heard him talk about, in interviews. People have asked him, why he is the way he is, why he's so driven and so committed, and why he's accomplished so much. And he had an existential crisis at like the age of 11. You know what I mean? Like, dude, when I was 11, I was picking my nose and like playing baseball in the backyard. Elon Musk is having an existential crisis where he's thinking about his place in the universe and what the meaning of life and why am I here and what am I supposed to do? And Joseph Smith was 14 years old, and he's essentially having the same kind of thing. He's experiencing this existential crisis where he is just absolutely possessed with this desire to know, which church should I belong to? Because there's all these different churches teaching all these different things. Yeah, James 1:5. And that verse is for Latter-day Saints. If anybody listening here is not a member of the church, James 1:5 is maybe the most foundational single verse for our church, because that single verse is what started it all. Joseph had this burning desire, and he's like, I gotta know, I need to know, like this is important, what church I go to, because all these churches are teaching different things. And if I want to, go to heaven, if I want to be saved, I need to know which one of these churches I'm supposed to be going to. And he read James 1:5, and it said that if you lack wisdom, ask of God. He giveth liberally and upbraideth not. So he was like, okay, I'm going to trust it. I'm going to trust what the Bible said. The Bible said, if I'm ignorant and there's something I want to know, then I can ask God. And so that's exactly what he did.
I really like the extra wording in that verse. So you could go from, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, ... and it shall be given him. But I love the extra explanation. He says that gives to all men liberally, freely,
Mm-hmm.
and upbraideth not. He's not going to scold you, get on to you for asking a question.
Mm-hmm.
And I
And what's
really
the
love
next
that.
verse? What's the next verse?
The next verse, verse 6.
But let him ask in
faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like the wave of the sea tossed to and fro, so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that too. Kind of go hand in hand. And like Kenny was saying, he's praying with some real intent there, fasting, praying for 3 days, and knowing that if he gets his answer, it's going to change his life. So that's not wavering. That's intense. That's great. Good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And he, I love how he compares himself to Paul, how, in verse 24, I've thought since that I felt much like Paul when he had made his defense before King Agrippa and related the account of the vision he had when he saw a light and he heard a voice. But still, there were but few who believed him. Some said he was dishonest. Others said he was mad. And he was ridiculed and reviled. But all this did not destroy the reality of his vision. He had seen a vision. He knew he had seen a vision. And all the persecution under heaven could not make it otherwise. And though they should persecute him to death, yet he knew and would know to his latest breath that he both had seen a light and heard a voice speaking to him, and all the world could not make him think or believe otherwise. And that's it's almost like, Paul was how there's all these things that happen through the Bible that are like a type of Christ, or things, of like a foreshadowing of the future kind of thing. And so Paul, in a way, even though I'd never thought of it this way, was kind of a foreshadowing, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like of
at least three shadows. For sure.
3 shadows. And one thing that I love that I didn't know until now either. I don't know. Sometimes I'm kind of obtuse and I miss things. But in the Gospel Library app, there are all 4. There were 4 different accounts, 4 different accounts of Joseph Smith's vision that he gave. And I've heard people try to use that to discredit the church, to say that, well, he was lying because he told different stories at different times and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, they're here. Like, nobody's trying to hide these other accounts. And the other accounts were at different times for different audiences. And it's like the 4 Gospels in the Bible. If we've studied the New Testament and we've read the 4 Gospels, and the 4 Gospels are different. The 4 Gospels actually have what seem to be contradictions between them, but we obviously believe the Gospels contained in the New Testament to be true, and understand that every single word and idea doesn't have to match exactly for these things to be true. And just like Joseph Smith's vision, there are certain details that might have been left out in some accounts, or, extra things added in this one.
I think too, though, I mean, I might be wrong on this, but I think he was speaking to different groups. So it's kind of different settings and stuff. So it's not, if you're talking to the primary and you give a talk on faith and prayer, it might have some differences than talking to the young men and young women versus talking to the elders quorum versus talking, at a high council meeting or something like that. So you're still talking about faith and prayer, and you're not necessarily contradicting, but you may have additional details and discussions depending on the setting that you're in. And that's kind of the way I've taken it in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Verse 20. It's when he was talking to his mother, after, his mother asked him if he was okay and all that kind of stuff. And he said, it seems as though the adversary was aware at a very early period in my life that I was destined to prove a disturber and an annoyer of his kingdom. Why should the powers of darkness combine against me? Why the opposition and persecution that arose against me almost in my infancy? I just got chills, man. Like,
yes.
that just, oh yeah, it gives me chills, man. It's like, dude, the devil knew. He knew that he was going to, and isn't that what we should all aspire to be?
Right. Yeah,
The
absolutely.
disturber
Absolutely.
and the annoyer of the kingdom of Satan. Like,
That's right.
like, dude, I'm going to get under the devil's skin so bad that he's going to hate me. You know? He's going to throw everything he's got against me, because that's what we should be striving for.
That's it.
Amen. Amen. Well, I think we'll bring this Come Follow Me discussion to a close right there. That was good stuff, Kenny. Appreciate that.
Good job,
Appreciate
Kenny.
that. Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
In case we haven't mentioned it, this is our very first episode of a little bit different format, and we're still trying to work out the kinks.
Working them out. So speaking of that, Joe, so you've got our church news this evening?
Yeah. Nice. The church news. You ready for this? We're going to bounce around a little bit.
Let's do it.
West Point and Teddy Roosevelt.
BYU, West Point, and Teddy Roosevelt.
When you want me to start sharing some stuff.
What are the connections between those three very diverse, seemingly unrelated things?
I'm gonna sew them together for you.
Sew them together. Let's do some
BYU. Just a few days ago, the Salt Lake Tribune, I can't remember her name, and I'm blocked with a paywall, you know. But the journalist at the Salt Lake Tribune, she's well known. I can't remember her name, but she wrote this article.
Dude, the Salt Lake Tribune is official.
Doesn't matter. Don't give them more attention. That's what that's what I feel like this really is.
I would not give a penny of my money to the Salt Lake Tribune. That's the most garbage newspaper in the country.
It looks to me like they're just attention seeking, you know, behavior or whatever.
Very much.
So anyway, she wrote this article about dark days ahead at BYU, and professors, you know, scared for their jobs or something along those lines. And she really comes down hard on Elder Clark Gilbert. That he's I can't remember. He's kind of in charge of the ecclesiastical side of BYU and stuff like that. Basically, ensuring that they're in line with the church. And so she labels this accusation that he basically met with all the professors down there and kind of categorized them in one of four categories, like, you know, lockstep with the church and its teachings, kind of you know, lukewarm on the church and its teachings, or, you know, making some comments against the church, and then just flat out against the church. And those ones he would just like to leave. He would like them to leave. And I'm like, wait, that's the bombshell here? Like, wait
hallelujah.
So she's saying how mean that is,
what
how
I'm
cruel
saying.
that is, and how could you do that? And she the other part of that accusation is that she's saying that he's holding them to a higher standard than even the temple recommend interview questions and stuff like that. And so apparently there's this part, this is where the controversy comes in. I couldn't find a copy of it, but reportedly the issue is one of the temple recommend interview questions is, are there any groups or policies that you support that go against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints' teachings, including the family proclamation and the church's stance on marriage and stuff like that. Marriage and gender, I think, is how they phrased it. And so that's an additional question they're being asked. And so they have to speak to that. So I think that's an interesting thing. And I thought I wanted to see your comments on it too. My thought is, you know, the temple questions, the temple recommend interview questions are, I think, intentionally so left fairly broad and open to interpretation. The famous one, I mean, I say famous, the one that stands out the most is probably tithing. You get many different thoughts on that. Is it gross pay? Is it net pay? Do you count the fiscal year, the calendar year? What, you know, how do you figure all that out? Yes, exactly. So ultimately, the instruction I've been given is essentially it's yours to answer. do you feel you are paying a full tithing? And if you feel you're paying a full tithing, then you're a full tithe payer. That's between you and the Lord. You're going to work it out. And so it's interesting now that they're adding a bit further stipulation. Now, they recently did this with the garments. They've added that extra statement on wearing the garments and specifics about the representation of the garments and kind of what it means. That previously wasn't in there, but now it is. It's getting more specific, so you get less. It's getting less
general,
broad, less general, less interpretive, and more specific. And so it seems like, at least for these professors, the question on, are you supporting anything that goes against the church, is getting more specific. And it wouldn't, this is my take only, it wouldn't surprise me to see that or some form of it become part of the temple questions for everyone else at some future point.
Have you seen Jacob Hanson's response video to that?
I haven't.
It's great.
Several of the people I spoke with speculate that it's harder for women to get through the process than women candidates.
Gotcha. So you went and got together with your feminist friends and speculated. And surprise! They speculated that it was about sexism. Speculation. Top-tier journalism coming from the Salt Lake Tribune.
People I spoke with worry that this is leading the school to become more rigid, that some of the best and the brightest LDS faculty will not be applying to teach there. Many very good faculty could leave, either forced out or just choosing to leave, which would be a tragedy for the school that's tried to be excellent and wants to be seen as excellent. But if its best and brightest faculty choose not to go there, it will definitely limit its accomplishments.
Do you see what she is subtly implying? She is essentially saying that unless we are willing to compromise basic Christian values and doctrine, we won't get the big accomplishments and accolades from the world. And it reminded me of a story from the New Testament.
The devil took him up on an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, "All these things I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, 'You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only you shall serve.'"
You see, Peggy just doesn't understand that as Latter-day Saints, we aren't seeking prestige at the expense of our faith.
So just to clarify, you're saying that the professors are being asked this?
The professors have to have a temple recommend, as my understanding anyway.
Right.
As part of the employment. But they are being asked that additional clarifying question with it, or in a separate interview or whatever.
Right.
So do you support anything that goes against the church? And do you support anything that goes against the church's position or policy on the family, marriage, and gender? And so a lot of people are taking umbrage at that. And some have left.
Something I didn't know. I didn't know that BYU professors had to have a temple recommend. I assumed that most of them didn't, because of a lot of the stuff that we see coming out of BYU.
Right.
There's so many professors that seem openly antagonistic to the church and the gospel and all this kind of stuff that, that they're, I mean, I didn't even think they had to be members of the church, like from what I'm seeing, it doesn't seem like that, but, I'm glad that the church is kind of clamping down on that a little bit and trying to get things moving back in the right direction. I've seen people online talk about, well, they're not being, BYU's not being woke, but we're not turning into Liberty University either. I've heard that a few times. And I'm like, dude, what's wrong with Liberty University? I have no problem with Liberty University. It's like Liberty University is an openly and unapologetically Christian university, period.
Right.
And the way I feel like BYU everybody knows that BYU is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And if you don't like the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, BYU might not be the best school for you.
Right. And that was going to be my point, is that it's not a public institution, it's a private institution.
Right.
One. And when it's private, you can run it however you want to run it, whoever owns it. In this case, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, very prominent in their Christian beliefs, stance on the family. And secondly, Kenny, you said then don't attend. Would also add, don't apply to work there. As well. If you don't believe and agree the same way.
Yeah. If you have a problem with the family proclamation or any doctrines that they're taught and embraced by the church, then maybe teaching at BYU isn't for you. Maybe you'd be better suited somewhere else.
So I'm glad to hear you, brethren, agree with me. Let me add to this to illuminate the situation a little bit more, or maybe in a different light, so people can understand a little bit better. So in May of 2016, there was a cadet at West Point named Spencer Rapone. And now you may not remember his name, but I bet you'll remember his photo. You had the photo there, Jackson? He's the cadet that graduated in 2016 and took some private photos. He kept to himself. There we go. There's one. Communism will win, with the fist, the socialist fist. And then right below it is the Che Guevara blood red t-shirt as a West Point graduate. Now, he took these pictures kind of off to the side, apparently, in 2016. But then in 2017, in the fall, there was this the whole deal with Colin Kaepernick. And so he posted these pictures publicly in support. I'm not exactly sure how that worked out, but support for Colin Kaepernick, meaning I'm not sure how that's supposed to tie in with feeling oppressed by the NFL because he didn't get a contract. So communism, I don't know how that connects. But anyway, so of course it caused a firestorm online. This is a U.S. Army officer, and he's posting these things. And Senator Marco Rubio said specifically a year later, when things were action was taken, he says, while in uniform, Spencer Rapone advocated for communism and political violence and expressed support and sympathy for enemies of the United States. I'm glad to see that they have given him an other than honorable discharge. He was initially Rapone when this all broke, and there was kind of that firestorm, and people were going, what? At West Point? You've got someone who is representing the antithesis of West Point.
Yeah.
And so he was initially charged with conduct unbecoming of an officer. And after a full investigation, he was discharged with other than honorable terms.
So what does that mean exactly? Is that a dishonorable discharge, or is that
not quite? It's kind of like we're just going to agree to disagree, and you can move on. We're releasing you from your contract. Your service is now severed. So that's my understanding, without having to go through further kind of long drawn out ordeals.
I feel like a dishonorable discharge would have been more appropriate, but
that would have been nice. Yeah. But then the problem is,
we literally fought multiple wars to defeat communism.
Sure, but that's kind of the challenge.
The antithesis of everything the United States stands for. So
So that's kind of the challenge at the time, though. At that time, and maybe they've got things built into it now. But how do you discharge someone for an opinion they have, right? Or an ideology that they represent? If they're not taking or breaking any law, how do you then say dishonorable discharge? So I think they that's why it went into this mid category where they just said, well, we're the institution in charge. We can, it's one of those signs at the beginning at the register at the diner that we reserve the right to serve or not serve anyone we choose, kind of like that. And that's my point with BYU. All right, BYU is West Point in this scenario. The U.S. military decides who's going to represent the U.S. military. They decide what is the conduct of their officers. And they decide what is conduct unbecoming. By definition, if you define what conduct is expected of an officer, then you define what conduct is unbecoming of an officer, right? And I think BYU, the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, who owns BYU and pays these employees and stuff, I think they have that right. Like the church is a religious, which is essentially an ideological institution. BYU is a educational ideological institution that is owned by another ideological institution, essentially, right? So why would they not have the ability to dictate, you're going to match our ideology? If you know what I'm saying? Like, this is going to be in line because that's who we are. It's like a brand thing. Like if you got some employee that says, you know what, I'm going to spell Nike, N-I-K-Y on these shoes from now on because that's what I do. Nike reserves the right to say, no, that's not our brand. That's not going to work for us. You're fired. For everybody else in the world, this is called a performance review. And I don't know what they're freaking out over, that your employer can say, you know what, you're not in line with our brand. You are not in line with our conduct of officership. You're fired. That's what everybody else lives with. So I don't know what cloud they live on where they think that this is somehow being unfair to hold them to the standard of the church. Now, they would argue that, well, now it's going to stifle opinions. You can't really talk things through. It's a hush word. You can't even say, doubt or faith crisis or whatever. But I would argue that is not discouraged. I think you can have those discussions. I think you can have discussions on communism in the military. But if you're the officer, kind of guiding these conversations, you need to be guiding it from the position of communism was a bad thing. Lots of people died to defeat it. Not we should give communism another chance. It's the same thing with the professors at BYU.
Died, even more people died as a direct result of its implementation.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think the same thing at BYU. You can have these conversations, but you as the instructor, you as the professor, I think it's part of the trust that's placed in you that you're going to take the educated and the ecclesiastical position of faith. To defend the faith in these conversations. You can steel man the argument of the other side, but I think the final say is, clearly I'm here as part of this church, part of this institution to say this is the right side, not, you know what I mean? Like, not go against it. That just seems crazy to me that they would do that. Any thoughts on that before I tie in the last part?
Yeah. And I don't think, I don't have any problem with cutting all of these professors that are openly contradicting the teachings of the church. And BYU has some amazing professors. There are some people at BYU. There are some of the most brilliant people on the earth are professors at Brigham Young University. Dude, they have some top-notch professors. You have anybody, obviously I didn't go to BYU, but I've talked to lots of people who have, and everybody I've talked to said, dude, you will get a top-notch world-class education at Brigham Young University. I'm glad to hear nothing secondhand. It's like it's comparable with any of the Ivy Leagues as far as the actual education you're receiving. It's just without all the crazy indoctrination nonsense. Cut that out. Get rid of those professors and keep the good ones. There's plenty of good ones there.
So I'm glad to hear you say that because Elder Gilbert, the one that was castigated in this journalistic
for literally doing his job.
Yeah. He posted, he didn't interact with her, didn't give her the time of day for her article, but he did post I don't know, it's the same day or in response to or whatever, but he posted it on X Twitter. Just that the university continues to grow and improve, and it's actually got lots of talent coming to it from Ivy League schools now. LDS professors and stuff who are saying, whatever's changing at BYU, we like, and we're coming home. And so, touche, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been, I don't know which episode it was, but several episodes ago on one of our Think Linger Longers, where I had mentioned that, you used to be pretty excited about the opportunity that your children might be going there. And then, but recently with the kind of change that we had seen from the outside looking in anyway, it appeared that they were taking more of a liberal movement against the standards of the church, against exactly the things that we're talking about. And so I wasn't as excited anymore. But when I saw this come out and kind of a turn back, and it's not that the church is making a turn back, it's just the administration kind of doing their job and ensuring
pulling back on the reins.
Exactly, pulling back on the reins. Great way to put that. So I was kind of reinvigorated there about the possibility of my children going there. So okay, it might not be all that it seems, or has to have seen.
You know what? One of the most interesting parts.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
About it is Elder Gilbert apparently put this in place, this enhanced interview and categorization of, where you lie on the spectrum of supporting the church or not. Apparently that was all in 2022. So several years ago is when this was kind of begun. And then they've just kind of been like moving things into place, I guess. And so
that's as good. Always, they're always a little ahead of what we think they are, aren't they?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like maybe there is a certain percentage or a part of it that reflects a change in the culture, because I feel like the pendulum has started to swing in the opposite direction. There's so many people who are absolutely fed up with all the hardcore left-wing, quote unquote, woke nonsense that's been going on that everybody looks at and knows is ridiculous and absurd, but you're not allowed to say that, and blah, blah, blah. And the University of Chicago, actually just a few years ago, it's probably about that same timeline, because I know it's been within just the last few years. The University of Chicago released an official statement that they, from that moment forward, were basically a safe space for free speech, because there were so many kids getting failing out
or whatever,
out of school or whatever for not towing the line with the hardcore left-wing woke stuff, and the University of Chicago was like, look, that's not good education. You know what I mean? We have to be able to entertain different worldviews and different opinions, and we have to be able to talk about things and debate things if we're going to learn. And so, the University of Chicago adopted that policy, and I was like, man, I hope other universities follow suit, because even in a secular state university, that to me is by far the best policy. They weren't shutting down anything. They weren't saying, well, you can't be talking about this woke stuff. All they said was like, look, this is a free speech zone. Right. If you have an opinion, if you can back it up, you are more than free to express your thoughts and express your opinion and express why you hold that opinion.
And even if you can't back it up, you can still try to, right? I mean,
you can try to, and everybody else is free to counter your opinion.
That's right.
And that's the thing that universities used to operate on. That it's ironic to me that debate has all but disappeared in most universities today, whereas debate used to be the
backbone,
of any university, because the idea that universities operated on is we're going to teach the facts. We have these professors who are experts in their field, and they're going to teach all the facts, and then you form your own opinions based on the facts, and you need to be able to defend them. And so they had debates all the time. Like all classes had a debate aspect to them, because if you felt like, well, I think this and this and this, they say, okay, back it up. Let's set up a debate.
Taught you how
Johnny
to think.
Over here who believes oppositely. He said he's willing to put his ideas forward. Let's match the ideas up. And it's kind of like, the battle of ideas is really what it's all about. That's what the agora was in ancient Greece. It's like that's how knowledge moves forward, is people presenting ideas, and then bad ideas don't survive. You know what I mean? It's almost like it's like an intellectual Darwinism of sorts, like One of my favorite quotes, Sean Hannity said one time years ago, conservative ideas, when properly expressed, will always win in the marketplace of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's a cool approach. If you believe your position will always win in the marketplace of ideas, if your ideas are properly expressed, then do it. Express your ideas, back them up. You know,
yep. There's a quote like that about truth, I think. I have to find it. There's a quote about truth that's similar to that. Well, let me bring you to the third point of this triangle here. Teddy Roosevelt. On the 4th of July, 1858, he was in the Dakota Territories. Now, he was a rich kid. His dad made a lot of money. He was a glass maker, and after the big fire in Chicago, made a lot of money selling glass to rebuild Chicago, basically, tying it in with what Kenny was just talking about. And so even though he was a rich kid, his dad had taught him that you got to lead a strenuous life. You got to build yourself up physically and do hard things. And I think that's a message.
Wasn't he kind of a weak, sickly kid too? Wasn't that part of why
he had asthma, which their treatments for asthma back then are hilarious. They would like give him a cigar to smoke if he was having an asthma attack, or drink really hot, really strong black coffee, and then like that'll help your asthma. But his dad told him like you gotta
bleed you out.
His dad told him you have a strong mind, but you're gonna have to build your body. And actually built him a gym in their home, and so he did. He pushed himself. And I guess in adulthood, it was not noticeable that he had any kind of lung problem. But anyway, in the Dakota Territories, he lived on the land and was a cowboy, essentially. And he came across this little town in the Dakota Territory, and they asked him to give a speech on the 4th of July, 1858. So he did. And it's called, many people refer to it as the Big Things speech. And on that first page there, kind of on the right-hand side, you'll see fourth paragraph up from the bottom. You have already been told very truthfully and effectively of the great gifts and blessings that you enjoy. And we, all of us, feel most rightly and properly that we belong to the greatest nation that has ever existed on the earth. A feeling I like to see, for I wish every American to always feel the most intense pride in his country and in his people. But as you already know your rights and privileges so well, I am going to ask you to excuse me if I say a few words to you about your duties. Much has been given to us, and so much will surely be expected from us, and we must take heed to use right the gifts entrusted to our care. The Declaration of Independence derived its peculiar importance not on account of what America was, but because of what she was to become. She shared with other nations the present, and she yielded to them the past, but it was felt in return that to her, and to her especially, belonged the future. It is the same with us here. We Grangers and cowboys alike, we have opened a new land. We are the pioneers, and as we shape the course of the stream near its head, our efforts have infinitely more effect in bending it in any given direction than they would have if they were made farther along. In other words, the firstcomers in a land can by their individual efforts do far more to channel out the course in which its history is to run than can those who follow after them. And their labors, whether exercised on the side of evil or on the side of good, are far more effective than if they had remained in old settled communities. And the reason I bring that up, I think it's a cool speech. You should read through it. There's lots of other good stuff to take out of it. But the reason I bring that up is to these professors, they have a very key position in shaping the lives of these individuals, their educational lives, their professional lives. But because it is a religious institution, because it is tied to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its ideologies and its beliefs, then it also affects their spiritual lives, right? Yeah. And just like the pioneers in a new land, these minds of these young people are much like a new land. And these professors and teachers are very much like those people at the headwaters of a river who hold immense power on shaping the course that river will forever flow. And so I think it's right, not just okay, but right for the church to kind of pull back on the reins of teachers who are not doing justice to their prophetic vision of what this school should be doing for these kids, for these young people, and shaping their future according to their inspiration and guidance from God. And if it is not so, then it is not a religious school. And if it is not a religious school, then all this is for naught, and they don't need a job there anyway. They could go teach at any other school anywhere else. Yeah. But if you want to teach there, then you need to be all in. That's my opinion.
Amen.
It's the same thing. There's a conflict of interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
If I'm working for Home Depot, but I'm constantly sending my people to Lowe's, right? Or if I'm working for State Farm and I'm constantly sending my people to Allstate and saying, well, Allstate's better this, you shouldn't even, so it's a conflict of interest.
That's right. And that comes up in your performance review. If you did something like that, it would come up in your performance review, and you would get demoted, you would get punished, you'd get fired. And so that's what everyone else has to deal with. But I really feel like with the what would you call them? The intellectual elites, tenured professors and stuff like that, and journalists. More and more, it seems like they have segregated themselves from the rest of society in their ivory towers, and they feel like the rules don't apply to them. And they seem shocked. They seem flabbergasted that they can't just say whatever the heck they want and do whatever the heck they want. That how dare you hold me accountable like everyone else in the world has to be held accountable. And it's amazing to me that they're amazed.
Well, that was a wonderful breakdown there. That whole situation there. So very, very good. Very good.
BYU, West Point, and Teddy Roosevelt. See, it goes
I like
together.
It, man. I like it. Well, very good.
What you got there?
Can I actually say one thing for world news?
We're all from the South. We're all from the South. We got fear people and we're not afraid to stand our ground.
Real quickly, world news. President Jimmy Carter passed away. He is a native son of Georgia. Peanut farmer, nuclear engineer, and president. Nobel Prize winner. Is that right? Nobel Peace Prize.
That's right.
Yeah. I wanted to share two quick quotes from him because I know many people could say many things, and there's lots of division politically these days. But I think my personal take on him is he's a very good person. But sometimes good people maybe aren't the best fit for a tough job.
Yeah.
Anyway,
many times before, in my opinion, I think Jimmy Carter was a great man, but not a good president.
Not a good fit for the situation or the things going on at the time. But at any rate, I wanted to share.
I could criticize him as a president, but I would never disparage his character.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, the Habitat for Humanity, I think, is a big thing.
Absolutely.
And I think that's awesome.
Great man.
I wanted to share two quick quotes from President Jimmy Carter. One regarding marriage. He talked about his wife, Rosalind. They were married for 80 years. That's an incredible accomplishment in and of itself. And anyone who's married to a Southern woman could appreciate this quote. He said, "I've never won an argument with her. And the only times I thought I found out the argument wasn't over yet." And then another quote from him, which may be the strongest thing I've heard from him, because he seems always more of a kind of a meek and timid almost individual. But he had this to say, which I thought was very strong. "I have one life and one chance to make it count for something. I'm free to choose that something. My faith demands that I do whatever I can, wherever I can, whenever I can, for as long as I can." And he did.
Good. That's good. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because I'd actually written down here his that same thing. And since you brought it up, I will mention. So I watched some of the funeral today. I don't know if y'all had a chance to see any of it.
Yeah.
So very interesting. So Jimmy Carter defeated Gerald Ford in the presidential election, opposite sides of the aisle, and they had a pretty heated race there with each other, both throwing things that about the other one that they didn't like. And that turned into a very close relationship and friendship with each other after they both were kind of done with politics and everything. And so much so that Gerald Ford asked Jimmy Carter to speak at his to give the eulogy at his funeral. And Jimmy Carter in return said, "I will do it if you will speak at mine." And so Gerald Ford wrote out a eulogy for Jimmy Carter, in which Gerald Ford's son read today at Jimmy Carter's funeral and everything. So just two good examples of getting past differences of opinion politically, maybe even beliefs and what have you, and really looking inward at the inside of a person, and finding and building a relationship. And then secondly, about that, the first individual that spoke was a grandson of Jimmy Carter. His name was Joshua Carter, and he gave a great sermon on Christ and the kind of people that we should be, and ultimately turning to Christ. And he said that Jimmy Carter very rarely, if ever, missed an opportunity to teach in his local Sunday school class at church every Sunday his entire life. Cool. for a long time. So yep, great example of a man. We can disagree politically with some of the things that he did, but that's 40 plus years ago. And the opportunity for funerals is that you go and honor the kind of the person, the life that they lived, and he lived a very honorable Christian life for sure.
Absolutely. Talking about presidential quotes, I'm gonna share my favorite presidential quote was from Abraham Lincoln when he was having the presidential debate when he was running against Stephen A. Douglas. Stephen A. Douglas accused Lincoln of being a two-faced politician. And Lincoln's response to Douglas was, "If I had two faces,
I would choose this one.
Think I'd be wearing this one?" Yeah.
Yeah. Lincoln was good. He was a good storyteller, and was quick on his feet with quips like that.
Yeah. That's good. Good.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's close this out with some parenting tips. Quick story. The one I decided to share was about giving your children something to do and responsibility, helping them learn, helping them be capable, helping them be productive citizens in this world. My Uncle Jerome was getting some used lumber from our local Bishop Moore. They're remodeling their master bedroom and stuff. And so my Uncle Jerome, he's dealing with one of our family's estate here locally. Jerome's out in Texas. And so he called me up and said, "Hey, you think Brody would be willing to go and pick up some lumber? I pay him a few bucks, to pick up some lumber, deliver it for me." So yeah, I think he'd be interested in doing that. And so I asked Brody and said, yeah. But I guess Jerome thought I was going to go with him and help him. So he called me on the day that Brody was going to do that, and he was asking about it. I said, "Yeah, I'm here. I'm here at my office, though. Brody's doing that himself, and he's got Chase with him." And he's like, he's having to pull a trailer, right? I said, "Yeah." He's like, "He's fine pulling a trailer." I said, "Yeah, he's been pulling trailers for several years now." And he says, "Well, he's going to have to back a trailer. He'll have to back it in." I said, "Yeah, he can back a trailer. I taught him how to back a trailer." And within just after that conversation, within just a few minutes, Bishop Moore gave me a call. He said, "Hey, have you ever seen Brody back a trailer?" I said, "Yeah, I've taught him how to back a trailer." He said, "Yeah, they showed up," and I said, "Hey, you need to pull up kind of real close here to next to the window, so y'all can just hand the lumber out the window." And Bishop Moore offered to back it up for him, and Brody's like, "No, I can do it. I got it." And he said, man, he whipped that thing back in there and backed it up right where it needed to be. And I said, "Hey," listen, I raised my sons to be capable of doing stuff.
Right.
And so So that's kind of the message. And Chase, with that being said, Chase had his first lesson, Chase 13, but he had his first lesson just a couple of weeks ago on back in a trailer for the first time and stuff.
Nice.
So he's already starting to work on that. So yeah, give your children, our children are so much more capable than we realize. Right. I saw a video the other day of a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old driving big John Deere tractors out there, running planters and stuff and everything. They are so much more capable than we realize. And I think we cripple them a little too much as they grow up. So,
I think that ties in with the Come Follow Me lesson this week too, because good parenting. Joseph Smith talked about his parents and talked, how awesome his parents were. He had just nothing bad to say about his parents, and his parents were, from all accounts, good people that really, like you, tried to teach their children to be able to think for themselves and to be capable and to be able to work and to be able to do things. And that, that enabled Joseph Smith at 14 to have the mental and emotional maturity to do what he did.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
I think our kids are definitely more capable than we in our helicopter parenting generation give them credit for. If there's any example to that in my mind that really stands out, it is that many parents don't trust their kids at age 17 when they're in high school, their senior year, don't trust them with the keys to the family car or to back a trailer for that matter. And yet 6 months later, they might find themselves in the U.S. Navy directing the parking of a $100 million jet within inches from the edge of a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier that is underway in high seas. So tell me how much that kid changed in 6 months. And, you wouldn't trust them with the keys to your car. Like they can handle a lot more, but they need to be held accountable for the things you're entrusting with them. They need to have that instruction like you provided to Brody and now to Chase, and that guidance. And if you provide those things, their capabilities are limitless. So.
Absolutely. There you go.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, all righty. Well, all you Patreon subscribers, appreciate you. You ought to enjoy this one. This is an almost 2-hour episode uncut. Woo! There you go. All you can get right there. All righty.
Can he get the trimming scissors out for the YouTube one?
For the YouTube version. That's right. Get them out. There we go. Right. There we go.
That's it.
All right, everybody. Until next time, y'all keep on striving.
Yeah, buddy.
From the side. Come on.
All right. Well,